every morning I eat, I'm a routine guy, but every morning I eat breakfast at Randy's Diner. And I saw my original broker there the other day. We sat and chatted for a minute, but he, I signed up in 1984 for real estate with Century 21, and he was my broker. And I didn't know how to get business. So I went to him, his name is Jace. I said, hey, Jace, what should I do to get business? He goes, you know what I did? He goes, I cold called. Now, he was a construction worker building sewers. He's the guy with the jackhammer, and then he decides to get into real estate. So he's broke like me, and he, picked up the Kohl's directory and just called up and down the streets through neighborhoods. And I said, does that work? He said, it worked for me. I said, okay, I'm going to do that. Now, I don't know what to say. I picked the area in which I lived, of course, like everybody would do, which happened to be an area that had a lot of equity because the people were older, the houses were older, so that worked out great. And then I go to make my first cold call. So I'm nervous, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, now I got my buddy Steve. He's sitting across from me, and we've never done this before. And I said, I'm nervous. I don't know what to say. And he goes, let's go talk to Jace. So we go to talk to Jace. I said, hey, Jace, we're getting ready to cold call. I feel kind of nervous. He goes, I felt the same way. I go, well, what did you do? He goes, well, if I'm going to be honest, he goes, I went down to Oak Street and Scottsdale Road. There's this bar there, and I went into the bar, and I had a couple of beers and came back, and cold calling was no problem. And I turned to Steve, and I said, this is why he's our broker. This is good advice. So we went to the very same bar, had a couple of beers. Cold calling was no problem, okay? I'm not recommending that. You might end up in a 12-step program, but anyway. So I picked up the phone to make my very first cold call, and the guy says, hi. I said, hi, is this Jerry? He says, yeah. I said, hey, Jerry, this is Bob Leffler with Century 21, and I was just calling to see if you might be thinking of selling your house. He said, as a matter of fact, I am. I said, really? He goes, yeah. I said, like when? He goes, like yesterday, man. I go, really? He goes, no, I'm just messing with you. I go, okay, so you're not thinking of selling your house? He goes, no, I am thinking of selling my house, but not immediately. I said, well, let's do this. Let's find a time when we can get together, and we'll meet and see what happens. So one thing leads to another. I do meet with Jerry. I list his house. Then back in those days, houses took a year or two to sell. Okay, now we're going into a market that may turn out to be like that again. But the average days on the market was about a year and a half, 2 years for the stuff I was selling, which was the high demand stuff in Scottsdale. And then all of a sudden they start widening the street next to his house. And he calls me up and says, hey, I want to take my house off the market until the construction's over. I said, okay, I think that's a good idea. So I take his house off the market. A couple of months later, he calls me up and he says, hey, I own some land up on Shea Boulevard, and this guy from another real estate company wrote me an offer, and I don't know what to do. Why don't you come over to my house and list that, and then you can negotiate that for me? I said, okay, sounds great. So I do that, 10% commission, closes quickly. And then he had money from that, and he didn't know what to invest it in, and I had my securities license. So I was selling these limited partnerships and these real estate things, and that my broker was a part of. So he and his mother buy some of those, and then the construction's over. I list his house, and then I sell him another house. And at the end of the day, this is not going to sound like a bunch of money in today's dollars, but in 1984, $20,000 was more money than my father had ever made in a single year. So all of that came from my very first cold call. Okay, now my buddy Steve, who was sitting across from me, he sees that. Now it takes Steve 100 calls probably to find somebody to say yes. It probably took me another 100 or so, or 200 or 500, who cares how many, to find somebody that said yes. But it tricked me into knowing the absolute fact that prospecting on the telephone always works. I knew that, and I got tricked into knowing that. Now, if I had called 99 people and Jerry was number 100, and they had all said no, Isn't it possible that I would have been tricked into thinking that there's an absolute fact that says that this cold calling thing doesn't work? Thank God that Jerry answered the phone on the very first call. Now, I went over there not knowing what I was doing everything wrong, some things right, but most things wrong. But he liked me, I liked him, it all worked out, and I made a whole lot more money, or made as much money as my father had made in one, and I made a whole lot more money than I had made ever in my life, me too, in a year. So prospecting on the telephone always works. Even when they say no, it's still working. You're just that many no's closer to a yes. So if any of this makes sense to you, I want you to go. If you happen to be earning less than you wish you were selling real estate, and you're open to the idea of having some help with that, go to fearlessagent.com. In the banner across the top, click on our webinar on the right, watch that video, and then give me a call at 480-385-8810. I've done, unlike the other coaches out there, I've actually done what I teach you how to do. The other coaches sold real estate for 2 years, the famous ones. I sold it for 10 times as long as that, okay? I know what I'm talking about. I never teach you to do anything I didn't do myself, and it always works. So give me a call and go to fearlessagent.tv, which is where we are now. Subscribe. Go to fearlessagentpodcast.com. Subscribe to my podcast, learn a bunch of crazy jokes. And then if you're a real estate company owner and you'd like to get rich by recruiting producing agents, go to fearlessagentrecruiting.com, watch my video, and then give me a call. But no matter what happens, I want to make you a fearless agent. Thanks.